It's crazy, right? Like how anxiety's basically become this unwelcome bonus that comes with living in this like always on world,
Yeah.
deadlines and notifications and all that.
Oh,
But you sent in this video, managing anxiety, practical strategies for a busy world, and it seems like you're ready to like actually tackle it.
yeah.
So that's what we're doing in this deep dive. We're going to unpack the 5 strategies from the video, but I think even more importantly, we're going to figure out how those strategies can actually work for you in like real life.
I think what's really cool is how the video starts off by kind of reframing anxiety.
Hmm?
It's not like a personal weakness or anything. It's actually our body's like ancient stress response system
Right.
just kind of
Yeah.
freaking out a bit because instead of saber-toothed tigers, we've got like overflowing inboxes.
Right. So it's not really about eliminating stress altogether. I mean, let's
Yeah.
be honest, that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's more about like the video says how we react to it. And that's
Exactly.
where those 5 strategies come in. So the first one, deep breathing, seems pretty straightforward, but the video suggests a specific 4-4-6 count. Like inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 6.
Uh-huh.
Is there something special about those numbers, or is that just like a random countdown?
It's definitely not random.
Yeah.
That longer exhale is like a direct line to your body's chill button.
Okay.
The parasympathetic nervous system,
Huh.
it slows down your heart rate and basically tells your brain, hey, everything's cool. We can stand down from red alert.
Right.
Even just a few minutes of this when you're feeling that anxiety kind of creep in can make a real difference.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. The next one's called the worry window. And I gotta be honest, when I first heard that, I was like, wait, am I supposed to like schedule time to stress out?
Right.
That seems kind of counterintuitive.
It might seem that way at first,
Mm.
but the idea isn't to like wallow in your worry. Think of it more like giving your anxiety a designated space, so it doesn't just take over your entire day.
Okay.
The video even mentions this guy, Alex, who was so overwhelmed with work and life that his anxiety was through the roof. He decided to try this worry window thing. And instead of letting those anxious thoughts just spiral throughout the day,
Mm.
he'd write them down and be like, okay, I'll deal with you later during my worry window.
Whoa, so it's like setting boundaries for your anxiety instead of letting it run wild?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I can see how that could be helpful. Now, this next one, limiting stimulants. That one kind of threw me for a loop.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm practically run on coffee, but the video says things like caffeine and sugar can actually make anxiety worse. That's a tough one to swallow, especially for those of us who need that morning boost.
It's true. They might give you that like temporary energy lift, but those same stimulants can also trigger the same physical responses that fuel anxiety. Like a racing heart that jitters that feeling of being on edge.
Right.
It's almost like you're throwing fuel on the fire.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that Alex from the video, he realized that his afternoon coffee was actually making his evenings way more stressful.
Oh, wow.
So he decided to swap it out for herbal tea, and he noticed a huge difference in his overall anxiety levels.
Well, so it's not about like going cold turkey. It's more about being mindful of how those stimulants affect you individually.
Exactly. Pay attention to what your body's telling you.
Yeah.
You might find that certain stimulants affect you more than others, or maybe you just need to adjust the timing.
Right, like having your coffee earlier in the day.
Exactly. It's all about finding what works for you.
Mm.
And speaking of things that work, the video also talks about moving your body.
Oh, yeah.
I get that exercise releases endorphins and all that,
Uh-huh.
but what's the connection to anxiety? Is it just a way to blow off steam?
Endorphins are definitely the brain's happy chemicals, but there's more to it than that.
Okay.
Remember how we were talking about that like chill button?
Yeah.
Exercise can help you hit that button too, but in a different way. When you move your body, it helps regulate your stress response system,
Right.
making you more resilient to those like pesky stress hormones.
I like that pesky stress hormones.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a marathon or anything. Even a quick walk can help shift your mood. Alex from the story, he started incorporating these short walks into his lunch break,
Oh, nice.
and he found that it really helped him de-stress and clear his head.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's like building up your mental fitness just like you would build physical fitness.
I like that analogy.
The more you move, the better you become at handling those stressful moments.
It makes sense.
Now, the last strategy from the video, practicing gratitude, might seem a little fluffy at first glance,
Right.
but I'm curious, how does focusing on the good stuff actually help with anxiety? Is it just like a distraction technique?
It's more than just a distraction. It's about shifting your brain's focus. You know how when you keep thinking about something negative, it just seems to get bigger and bigger?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Gratitude is kind of like shining a spotlight on the positive, helping those good thoughts and feelings grow.
Okay.
It's like training your brain to look for the silver linings. which can make a huge difference when you're feeling anxious.
Right. So it's not just about ignoring the bad stuff. It's about actively looking for the good.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that neuroscience is actually backing this up. This idea of neuroplasticity.
Mm-hmm.
It basically means that your brain can change and adapt based on your experiences. So the more you practice gratitude, the more your brain starts to rewire itself,
Wow.
making those positive pathways stronger.
So it's like building a mental muscle for happiness.
Exactly. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Now, before we dive deeper into the science behind these strategies, I want to hear from you.
So we were talking about how gratitude can actually, rewire our brains for the better.
It's like we have more control over our thoughts and feelings than we realize. But before we get too deep into that, I'm kind of curious to know more about the science behind these strategies. We talked about how deep breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system.
Right.
But what's actually happening in our bodies when we take that long exhale?
Okay, so picture this. You're feeling anxious.
Yeah.
Your heart's racing. You might even be a little short of breath. When you do that 4-4-6 breathing pattern, you're basically sending a signal to your nervous system that it's time to chill out.
Like hitting the brakes on a runaway train of thought.
Exactly. And as your heart rate slows down, your brain gets the message that there's no immediate threat.
Right.
And that in turn dials down the production of those stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, that are making you feel so on edge.
So it's not just about feeling calmer, it's about actually changing our body chemistry.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Deep breathing brings more oxygen to your brain, which can help you think more clearly and make better decisions even when you're feeling stressed.
That's huge.
And speaking of managing those stressful thoughts, the worry window technique might seem a little strange at first,
Yeah.
but it's actually rooted in a really powerful concept called compartmentalization.
Okay. I was skeptical at first, but the idea of setting boundaries for my worries actually makes a lot of sense. But how does it work in practice?
It's like creating a mental filing cabinet for your anxieties.
Right.
Instead of letting those thoughts run wild throughout the day, you acknowledge them. Jot them down even, and tell yourself, okay, I'll deal with you later during my worry window. It's about recognizing those thoughts without letting them control you.
So it's not about suppressing our worries, but rather giving them their designated time and space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what's interesting? This technique actually taps into the power of mindfulness.
Okay.
By observing your worries without judgment during your designated time, you can actually reduce their intensity.
Like taking the sting out of them.
Yeah.
And speaking of things that can sting, we talked about how limiting stimulants like caffeine and sugar can actually make anxiety worse. It's hard to imagine giving up that morning coffee, but the video makes a compelling case for being more mindful of our intake.
Right. Remember Alex from the video?
Yeah.
He was struggling with sleep and just felt on edge all the time.
Uh-huh.
And he finally realized that his afternoon coffee was a major culprit.
Wow.
So he made the switch to herbal tea, and within a week he was sleeping better and felt way less anxious.
So it's not about deprivation, but more about paying attention to how those substances affect us individually. Maybe some people are more sensitive to caffeine than others.
That's right. Some people can handle a large latte with no problem, while others might feel jittery after just a cup of tea. It's about knowing your limits and choosing wisely.
Right.
And when it comes to choosing wisely, let's talk about exercise. We all know it's good for us.
Yeah.
But how does it fit into the anxiety equation?
Right.
It seems like more of a physical benefit than a mental one.
Well, it definitely has physical benefits, but it's also a powerful tool for managing anxiety. Remember how deep breathing helps regulate your stress response system? Exercise does the same thing, but it's like turning up the volume on that calming effect.
Oh, okay.
It's like training for a mental marathon.
I like that.
The more you move, the better equipped you are to handle whatever stress life throws your way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it doesn't have to be anything extreme.
Yep.
The video even mentions that a short walk can make a difference. It's about getting your body moving and letting those endorphins work their magic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even small bursts of activity can have a big impact on your mood and energy levels.
For sure. Now let's circle back to gratitude.
Okay.
At first I thought, okay, sure, being grateful is nice, but how does that actually help with anxiety?
Right.
But when you think about it, it makes sense.
It does.
It's like consciously choosing to focus on the good, even when things feel tough. But is there more to it than that?
There is. Gratitude actually has the power to change the way your brain functions.
Really?
It strengthens those neural pathways that are associated with positive emotions, making it easier to access those feelings when you're feeling stressed or anxious.
So it's not just about feeling good in the moment, it's about rewiring our brains for long-term well-being.
Exactly.
That's pretty powerful.
It is. And this brings us back to the idea of neuroplasticity, the ability of our brains to change and adapt throughout our lives.
Right.
The more we practice gratitude, the more we reinforce those positive pathways,
Yeah.
making it easier to navigate life's challenges with a more resilient and optimistic mindset.
So it's like building a mental muscle for happiness. The more we use it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly.
Now, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with something to think about. Okay, so we've explored all the science behind these anxiety-busting strategies, and we heard how Alex from the video used them to really turn things around.
Yeah.
But now it's about figuring out what works for you.
Right. And that's where things get really interesting because
Yeah.
there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
The video encourages us to think of these 5 strategies as tools in a toolbox.
Oh.
So it's not about mastering all 5 perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about picking and choosing the ones that resonate with you the most.
So maybe deep breathing is your go-to for calming down quickly.
Exactly.
Or maybe you find that a daily gratitude practice helps kind of shift your overall outlook.
Right. It's about creating a personalized routine that fits your life and your needs.
And maybe even combining them. Like, what if you started your day with a few minutes of gratitude journaling
Yeah.
and then used deep breathing throughout the day to manage those little spikes of anxiety?
That's a great example. The key is to experiment and see what works best for you. And don't be afraid to adjust things as you go.
Right.
Life is constantly changing, and so are our needs.
It's like building your own personal anxiety-busting toolkit.
Yeah.
And you're the expert on what goes in it.
Exactly.
Now, beyond the specific techniques, I think there's a bigger message here that's really important. It's this idea that anxiety is a normal human experience.
Absolutely.
Mm.
It's not a sign of weakness or something to be ashamed of.
Right.
It's how our brains are wired to respond to stress.
Yeah.
Everyone experiences anxiety to some degree,
Yeah.
and it's what we do with it that matters.
So instead of letting anxiety control us, we can learn to manage it and use these strategies to navigate those challenging moments.
Yeah,
It's about taking back the power.
exactly. And that sense of empowerment can be so freeing. You're not stuck. You have options.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a few key takeaways. First, remember that you're not alone in this.
Right.
Anxiety is a common experience, and there are so many resources available to help you.
From the techniques we talked about today to the apps and books mentioned in the video,
Right.
there's a whole world of support out there. And don't underestimate the power of human connection.
Yeah, like talking to a trusted friend or family member or even a therapist.
Exactly.
That can make a world of difference. Sometimes just sharing your experience can really help.
It really can. And above all, be kind to yourself. Progress isn't always linear. There will be good days and bad days. Celebrate the wins and learn from the setback.
You got this. Keep exploring, keep learning, keep growing. You have the power to create a life where anxiety doesn't hold you back.
That's a great note to end on. Until next time, keep diving deeper.